Good morning. So yesterday we talked about Ta'anit Bechorot, the firstborns this year. Moving on now to talk about how and when we dispose of Hametz this year, being that it falls on Erev, Pesach falls on Shabbat. So let's go through the basic fundamentals and we'll come to how we do it. The Torah says that a person who eats Hametz on Pesach suffers the consequence of karet. Karet means being cut off. In the Rambam's philosophy, being cut off means that one dies spiritually after their death and has essentially no existence after they die. This severe punishment applies only to a person who eats Hametz during the 7 days of Pesach. Having said that, the Torah prohibits a person to eat Hametz from midday on the day before Pesach because this was the time the Korban Pesach was offered, and so during the time the Korban Pesach was offered, it was forbidden to eat Hametz. And therefore, from the Torah, it's already forbidden to eat Hametz from midday, which this year is about just after 1 o'clock, in England at least. Just after 1 o'clock, it's forbidden to eat Hametz from the Torah on Shabbat afternoon, and one carries this punishment of karet if one eats Hametz any time during the 7 days of Pesach. The Hachamim, however, were concerned that it didn't have clocks in those days and people can get confused between the different times, and said that when it comes to eating chametz, one needs to ensure they stop eating chametz already from 2 hours before midday and stop owning chametz from 1 hour before midday. You can't own or eat chametz from midday from the Torah, so they said with regards to eating, which is the more severe one, we stop doing it 2 hours before midday. This year in London, this is about 11:15. And you stop owning chametz and dispose of all chametz, but 1 hour before midday, which this year is about 5 minutes to 12. And so that means on Shabbat day, this year, Erev Pesach, one needs to stop and consume all their chametz before 10:45 in London at least, before 2 hours before midday. So this is why, generally speaking, people pray early on Shabbat morning this year, and therefore come home for 9:30, 9:45, and have their Shabbat lunch, breakfast slash at that time and finish it before 10:45, and then to dispose of any remaining chametz by 11:40, 11:50, whatever it is this year. Now, on Friday, of course, one can eat chametz the entire day, because you're going to be eating chametz, it's the 13th. You can eat chametz on Friday, you can chametz on Friday night, and even on Shabbat morning until 2 hours before midday. Disposal of chametz, however, really, strictly speaking, any chametz which a person is not going to be using on Friday night or on Shabbat morning, we'll talk later on this week about how one has the meals of Shabbat, but any chametz which a person is keeping over for Shabbat, of course one keeps. Any other chametz, strictly speaking, one can dispose and get rid of from one's property anytime on Friday. Because although the Hachamim said you have to do it 1 hour before midday, that's on Erev Pesach. This is the 13th. This is 2 days before Pesach. So strictly speaking, one can dispose of chametz the entire day. However, the Shulchan Aruch writes from the Rishonim that it's good practice to do so, to dispose of all chametz you're not going to be using during Friday, the rest of Friday and Shabbat morning, to dispose of it by the same time you would do in a regular year. Therefore, it's good practice to dispose of all chametz, which you're not going to be using on Shabbat, by 11:54 this year, so that we don't get confused between this year and other years and do it later on in the day in other years when one needs to dispose of it by an hour before midday. And so this is the good thing. A person should try and attempt to dispose of all of their hametz by 1 hour before midday on Friday, i.e. in London around 11:55. If one didn't do so, that's fine. One can continue to dispose of the chametz any time during the day on Friday. It's only the correct and good thing to do so at this time by 11:54. Mechirat chametz contracts. Most people just appoint their rabbi to act as an agent to sell their chametz on their behalf. But Mechirat chametz contracts will take place before 11:54 this year. People who are selling chametz in Onja will ensure that the sale takes place before 11:54, but it will be a continuous and rolling contract almost to allow those who don't put away their chametz, because chametz, the sale of chametz is put in specific locations. And so, although the sale takes place at before 11:54 to ensure the best practice for those who want to sell and get rid of their chametz at the correct time, it will still continue to hold all the way until Shabbat, if that makes sense. So therefore, a person should, as we said, try to dispose of all of their chametz before 11:54, which they're not using on Shabbat. If they didn't, they have the whole day, and the sale of the contract of sale of chametz will take place before the time of the fifth hour of 11:54, but it will continue to allow those who put their chametz away before Shabbat all the way up until Shabbat. So that's how we dispose of our chametz this year in terms of when. Sorry, that's when we dispose. Tomorrow we'll talk about how we dispose of it this year.